Hello, this is Hillary and Clinton, and welcome to BlackLantic, a podcast and media channel bringing East Coast voices to the world.
This week, we'll be talking about Emancipation Day and how it is the second year that this event has been officially recognized by the federal government. To anyone listening who is not aware of Emancipation Day, it is the day when the Slavery Abolition Act of 1833 became law across the British Empire on August 4th of 1834. So on this day, the practice of slavery officially ended for millions of African people and their descendants in Canada and around the world. It was March 24th, 2021, when members of Parliament unanimously voted to designate August 1st as Emancipation Day. This was pretty big in the news last year. Last year, there were a lot of virtual ceremonies that took place. And this year, there were finally, physical getting-togethers of people that took place across Atlantic Canada. So we have some guests here that were at different events that are going to talk about it and what it was like for them.
Yeah. So as usual, you can find us at BlackLantic on all our social medias and the website. And as Clinton just said, we have a smorgasbord of guests, and we also attended events. So we're going to have a smattering from like Halifax all the way to Whitby, Ontario, of what the different vibes were like and what was going on. So we've got Jennifer Dow, who's a recurring guest, Sandra Hannebohm, a recurring guest, and Matthew Martin, who we don't know how we haven't had you on yet, but you're finally here, and we're very excited to have all three of you on. How are you guys all doing today?
Who first?
I said all. I just wanted to know, is everybody
Please
good?
all answer unanimously.
Yeah,
like the
unanimously.
2021.
Thank you.
We may also have another guest popping in.
Yes.
Mamadou. Mamadou. Hopefully throughout the show.
It's okay. It's. I don't know if it's a Senegalese name, but I will say that I'm privy to the pronunciation because I have an uncle, Tonton Mamadou. So I'm just on the inside of that name. It's fine. So we'll start with Jennifer. I wanted to start with you. We're going to ask everybody the same questions, though. But what was the atmosphere of the event that you attended, but you helped organize with, I think, the New Brunswick Black Artists Alliance, correct?
Yeah, it was actually 3 organizations. So it was Reach in New Brunswick, the New Brunswick Black Artists Alliance, and the New Brunswick African Association. So our 3 organizations also helped to petition to have the day declared in the provincial legislature. And the atmosphere was celebratory, joyful. Everyone was happy. We had an incredible DJ, and we were downtown Fredericton, so we were actually included in the New Brunswick Day festivities. So it was a lot of really good energy.
Did you want to briefly explain too, because I know we discussed it a bit last time when you were here, but what like Reach organization does, and then all of the ones that are involved briefly, just in case no one listening is aware of what they all do for the community?
Okay. Well, I can speak on the New Brunswick Black Artists Alliance,
yes.
Because I'm also a member of that organization. So they're there to basically support and encourage Black artists in New Brunswick. Of course, I'm a historian, so my involvement with them is to bring the history of Black artists in New Brunswick to life. And Reach in New Brunswick stands for Remembering Each African Cemetery's History in New Brunswick. So we work to find and research, preserve, and document Black graves, and also to add information to all those buried and the family trees and the history that goes along with all of those buried in the cemeteries.
Amazing.
What did being at an event like that mean for you personally, Jennifer?
For me, it was incredible because I'm born and mostly raised in Fredericton for most of my life. And my mom was raised just outside Fredericton. So my mother was in attendance, my daughter was in attendance. And for me, it meant a lot because I seen the communities coming together. So it was the descendant communities, people like myself and my mother, Tondaway McCarthy, Dr. Mary Louise McCarthy Brandt, and others that are descendants of early Black New Brunswickers, coming together with those that are first, second, third, and fourth generation Black Canadians. And for me, just seeing us all come together as a community and to celebrate together, I don't even know if I have words to describe what that felt like.
I realized, by the way, I just want to circle back because I realized that like I didn't give you a chance to actually say your bio.
Yeah,
And I want to give everyone else the
thank you.
opportunity to. And I don't know if we want to do it all as a round right now, but you did mention that you're a historian and genealogist. But I want you to, if you have anything else to add about all of the amazing things you do for your community, in case no one else listened to the previous episode that you were on about the number 2 battalion, you have the floor, Jennifer.
Okay, so I am a descendant of early Black New Brunswickers. Most of my ancestors came with the Loyalists in 1783. I'm a genealogist and historian, and I'm carrying on my family's tradition of being the knowledge keepers and the genealogists in the family. So I work really hard to research all aspects of early New Brunswick Black history, because there's a lot out there that is just waiting to be told, a lot of stories that haven't been told, a lot of people in our communities that haven't had any attention in the past. So I just spend all my time researching and trying to bring those stories to light.
That's amazing. I feel like we might as well go around and get the bios from everybody else as well while we're doing this. So Matthew, if you wanted to go next just about your bio so that people watching this, because we want people to be watching on YouTube who see all of the lovely faces, know what everyone's about before we get into the events.
Yeah, so obviously my name's Matthew Martin. So I'm the executive director here for Black Lives Matter New Brunswick. I'm also a co-host on a show called MBWA, New Brunswickers Want Action, on CHCO TV. I'm also a co-host on a show called Color Bar, which is put on by CBC. And also a musician, although I haven't got to play any music recently just because I have no free time anymore. So that's pretty well what I do, but I nowadays mostly known for my work with Black Lives Matter, but folks recognize me probably from my music days, which seems so far away, but not really that far away. But yeah.
Amazing. And Sandra, we'll give you a chance as well to share your bio, although again, another person who's been on the show before, and we spoke about Twice as Good Media, but if you want to remind everybody about your bio and what you do.
Okay, I actually had to pull up my bio because I never know where to start with these things, but this voice is Sandra. This one's Sandra right now. I'm a journalist and a digital producer who's not really a fan of the daily news format. So I'm kind of more about narrative and human-centered information and stories. I worked for The Coast for a while, where I covered the local housing crisis and the growth of Airbnb. I did work for CBC, the Black Business Initiative magazine, Black to Business, Halifax Examiner, and now I work for Lion's Roar, which is the largest Buddhist magazine in the English-speaking world. Buddhists are a small population in the English-speaking world. Just a little disclaimer there. But yeah, so I run well, actually, I've helped launch a couple of different journalistic startups, also based on community issues around race, media, and politics. And then I started Twice as Good, starting with a newsletter where I curate Black news, curate and create Black news that centers human stories and the deeper context behind the headline in text and audio.
Thank you so much for all of that. As anyone listening can see, we have some amazingly interesting and accomplished people on the panel tonight, and we're so happy that you can all be guests. Thank you for that introduction. Jennifer, thank you for letting us know about the event in Fredericton, the sort of sense of community and joy you felt, and some of the meaning behind that for you. What about you, Matt? You attended an event down in St. John, of course, where I believe you were also a speaker. I think Hillary has some information she wants to put up on the screen while you're talking. Hillary's going to actually just briefly mention a little bit about the description of this event. I know it was mostly in French, but there's still a lot we can take from that. And go ahead, Hillary.
Yeah, so put on by the CPPAANB, which stands for in French, the Conseil des Personnes d'Ascendance Africaine du Nouveau-Brunswick, people of African descent of New Brunswick. And so in their little thank you note, they had a special mention to Dr. Fernand de Varenne, a UN special reporter on minority issues, the Honorable Jeanette Petitpas-Taylor, the Minister of Official Languages and Minister responsible for the ACOA, which I think stands for Atlantic something. I'll look up what that stands for in a second, but I know it has something to do with the Atlantic provinces. Then the Honorable Arlene Dunn, Minister of Aboriginal Affairs and Minister responsible for the Economic Development and Small Businesses, the Minister responsible for Opportunity New Brunswick, Minister responsible for Immigration. The Honorable Daniel Alain, Minister of Local Governance Reform to the Government of New Brunswick, Monique Leblanc, the General Counsellor of the City of Moncton, Manju Varma, the Commissioner Against Systemic Racism, Ms. Roussel Sullivan-Clow, Chairperson of the New Brunswick Human Rights Commission, Ms. Leonie Rutanga, a legal translator, Philomene Zangyo, a mama of the community. I really like how that's worded. Mr. Gilles Roy, the Vice-Recteur of l'Université de Moncton, Alexandre Cédric Doucette, the President of the SANB, which stands for the Société Acadian, the Acadian Society of New Brunswick, Mr. Matthew Martin, who we happen to have right here, and Nadine Duguay-Lemay, the CEO of Dialogue New Brunswick. Oh no, there's more. There's so many more.
That's
It's a huge
Cool.
list. Yeah.
a lot of names, a lot of names.
They brought everybody, just
Yeah.
Right,
everyone.
so I know to anyone watching on YouTube, and if you're watching on YouTube, please like and subscribe. Sandra is not sleeping. She had her own little disclaimer before the show started. She has dry eyes.
Thank
so
you.
if it seems like she's sleeping during the recording of this podcast, that's what's really happening.
Yeah, she's just suffering for us, and we're very
She-
appreciative. Thank you.
She falls
Yeah, I
over
also
in the
turned my
chair.
light off. I'm
That'll be a
sorry, it
different
looks
story.
like I'm taking a nap in a cave.
It doesn't. You're fine.
No, it's all good.
And
So
I was just going to say briefly, if people wanted to read the full list, the CPPAANB is the acronym. They have a Facebook page where they've thanked everybody, including Matthew, and this beautiful long list of everybody who turned out, which is very crazy and amazing. Go ahead.
certainly a big list, and we're so happy to have Matthew on tonight because we're going to have him on again very soon on the show. And Matthew is actually someone who's done amazing things in New Brunswick in the past 2 years. Well, before that time as well, but certainly with Black Lives Matter, some amazing things. So Matt, you were at the event, and
Yeah.
what was the vibe like? What was the feeling on the floor during technically the first ever in-person celebration of Emancipation Day in St. John, New Brunswick?
So this event actually happened in Moncton.
Sorry, in Moncton.
Yeah, no. It was very awesome. A very different feel than the event we had in St. John, which we can get to. But the Moncton event felt so like gala. They did a phenomenal job putting the event together. All the speakers were absolutely phenomenal, and it was really a time where we were celebrating the Black community members from the Moncton region. It was absolutely a great time. The ability to just network and meet people, as you mentioned, it was the first in-person event. So I sat on meetings with almost all of these folks who are at this event, and I've never met them in person. Well, there I am there. I've never met them in person, so it was great to actually meet these folks and shake their hands and be able to just talk to them. It was just a phenomenal event. All the speakers were absolutely amazing. They had a performer there whose name is escaping me. He was awesome. Myself and my fiance and our youngest daughter went. My youngest daughter had a blast. Now she's only 8 months old, but she's clapping her hands, so into it. And it was really just a time where we were celebrating just Black excellence. They had also given out awards to some folks for a variety of different reasons for their activism within the community, as well as to folks who have within the government who have worked very closely with them and helped them fulfill some of their initiatives. So it was a very I would call it a star-studded event, in my opinion. Just so many great Black leaders and activists in one spot. It really was like a star-studded event for myself. Again, just to meet everybody and talk and network and hang out. I can't even put it to words how phenomenal the event was. It was a blast. The food was great. It was just such a good time.
To anyone who is listening to the audio podcast, Hillary has been going through what I think is hundreds of photos of the event that took place at the Delta Hotel in Moncton.
200.
Matt's
Yeah.
description doesn't feel far off, right? It really looks like a star-studded event. The dress, the clothing of the people are immaculate. The smiles on everyone's face, the energy is just fantastic, and yeah, it's historic in a way. Oh, there was Junior from the racism. Okay, so I think you answered question number 2, like what did being at an event like that mean for you? And again, I think people can see it on your face, anyone who's watching. But your takeaway from that, I mean, it may seem a bit obvious, but why do events like this need to continue to take place in Atlantic Canada?
Well, a whole slew of reasons. I mean, to jump to our event in St. John,
Sure.
you know, here in St. John, we focused on just really promoting Black businesses and Black leadership within the different organizations who are present. And why it's so important is just because it's a piece of our history, but it's also important to recognize the sacrifices that our ancestors have made, but also important to celebrate the accomplishments of our Black community members today and in the future. In St. John, we brought a lot of vendors in who do homemade goods, who brought different clothing. The first time ever going out in a public setting like this. We had BBI present as well, who got to connect with, I believe, 10 different small businesses. And I just followed up with them the other day that they've all actually connected and are pursuing now to actually push their business to the next level. For me, it's so important for these events because it acknowledges our history. Even for how brutal and racist it was, we're acknowledging that. But for us as Black individuals, to take that, recognize it, and use that to fuel us to continue to strive for more, to continue to push for more equitable changes within everything. And I can get into that whole conversation if you'd like. But for it's really important to celebrate who we are today, and recognizing the sacrifices our ancestors made, and by celebrating it every year, it's not something that's just getting pushed aside. We're continuing to do it, and it's going to carry on day to day.
Beautiful answer. I think maybe you can elaborate on some of that later on in the conversation if you'd like to. I'd love for you to bring that up again when we kind of just have like an open discussion. But thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay.
Sorry, I was looking because I was just thinking I wanted to share photos as well, like of like Jennifer and attending the event, and I thought I saw some, but I don't see. Do you know where I could very quickly find some? If there were any on Facebook, I checked the New Brunswick Black Artists Alliance and the event. Did Mary Louise maybe share some?
I think she shared some, and on Instagram, on the New Brunswick Black Artists Alliance, on their Instagram, we were sharing stories, or we had our photographer sharing stories all day.
Let me try to dig. In the meantime, while I continue to dig, Clinton, do you want to talk about Amherst?
Yeah, absolutely. So I live down in Dorchester, New Brunswick. So Moncton and Amherst is about the same distance from us, but this year we decided to scoot on over to Amherst to see what was happening. We heard about an Emancipation Day taking place in a place called Dickey Park. We had some friends whose family was putting it on, so we thought we'd go down there. There wasn't a lot of information on it online on Facebook, but we thought we'd go for the drive anyways. And when we turned up, it was so pleasantly surprising. There were a lot more people than we expected. There was probably about 60 people there, all outdoors on a large field. There were activities for kids, a tent, a stage, music playing, the works. And when the event started, of course, there was a fundraising walk earlier on that morning. When the event started, there was a beautiful opening song by someone named Lizette. Actually, I'll share my screen for a minute here. I only have a couple of photos, but just to give people a little bit of context here. Yeah, so this is just part of the scene, but it was an outdoor event with beautiful sunshine, cakes, hot dogs, hamburgers, water. A lot of things had been donated by the town of Amherst. This is Hal Davidson. I won't play his full speech, but he is a city councillor in Amherst, and so he gave a speech. There were some of the founders of the CANSA, Canadian African and Nova Scotian Association, giving talks on the history of Amherst, some of the history of slavery, ancestors, and also talking about a really interesting part of Amherst's history was not even 40, 50 years ago, the town was very divided and separated. There were Black people living there, but they certainly did not interact and mingle with other parts of the town. They stayed near this park, which is called The Hill. And yeah, there were just stories shared about some of the hardships and struggles. A lot of these people, probably similar to people in your family, Matt and Jennifer, and maybe even Sandra, that have been here for hundreds of years. So they talked about positive changes and such. But it was just the vibe there as well was very warm. It felt like a family barbecue. It was just a good environment. I got insights. I personally got to meet and connect with many people from Amherst. I think there's some new people we're going to have on the show very soon. And to me, one of the reasons why events like this have to continue is that yeah, I dropped my mic. Everyone laughed.
It just scared me more than anything, but proceed.
Okay, no, I'm kidding. Is community, the sense of community, the feeling of building and networking and meeting new people, because in some communities or places like Atlantic Canada, Black people can tend to be a little bit spread out and few and far between. So when we bring them all together in one place, it can only make us stronger. We hear new stories, we make new connections, we might learn about new businesses or new places where we can support. In my case, we learn about new people who can teach our listeners more about, Atlantic Canadian history and like a little town like Amherst, which a lot of people probably don't know much about. That's why things like this have to continue. I think it can only continue to strengthen the East Coast, Atlantic Canada, where we live. And yeah.
Amazing. Thank you for that recounting and the lovely pics of your lovely children. I will share briefly the Instagram account for the New Brunswick Black Artists Alliance and some of the performers and people who were there briefly before we get to Sandra and her experience at the Halifax National Black Summit, which was also taking place during Emancipation Day. Let me click share my screen. There we go. So we've got the lovely team of organizers here, some of them because you're not in it, Jennifer. So
that was actually last year. So
that's last year's photo.
Yeah, we did take an updated one. It just hasn't been posted yet.
Okay, good. Perfect. So performers, there was Making Africa Proud, Naomi Drummond Leslie as a guest speaker, Yusuf Shire as a guest speaker, Ron Tremblay as a guest speaker, Hero B as a performer, Ange Maid as a performer, Angie Aquin as a guest speaker, Seb Dredd as a performer, Jesse Sagawa as a guest speaker, Frankie P as a performer, Ronald Sharp as a guest speaker, and Sa Andrew as a performer who we've spoken to before. I mean, I saw from like the photos and like while it was taking place, it all like looked like a lovely event. That's why I was so glad we decided to do this, because everyone looked like they did such cool things. And on the first, I don't know where I was, but I was not engaging in my Blackness that day. Apparently, I don't know if I just took a nap all day, but I was like, oh yeah, everyone's doing stuff on the East Coast, and I'm just like hanging out. But we'll get to what I ended up doing for Emancipation Day after. Sandra, I want to hear all about I know Clinton first. Yes. You're on mute though.
If you want to share your screen for a minute, Hillary, just before we go on, I will
Sure.
just do a quick screen share of CANSA as well.
Oh, sure.
Again, the Canadian African Nova Scotia Association, and just a bit of what they do. I think they help to build up the citizens of Cumberland County, as well as helping African Nova Scotians. A really interesting thing about the event was that it was actually mostly organized by a 14-year-old girl who was an employee of CANSA. And yeah, she definitely was very accomplished for her age, because she scheduled like the walk and the games and the tent and the donations from the city to contribute, and so the stage and the mic and the chairs, and she put a lot of this together on her own. So a special shout out to Gia McDonald. And yeah, so that's just what CANSA is for anyone from Nova Scotia looking. I think they are an employment agency, but they're African Nova Scotian based, and they do a lot of work in Nova Scotia.
Super
So that's it.
cool. That's awesome. I really like that this 14-year-old was just like, nah, I'm gonna take over and do this and do it well. Thank you so much. I think that's great. Good for
Yeah,
her.
that's why I wanted to throw that in. Yeah.
Yeah, no, totally important. So yeah, Sandra, tell us about what the vibe and energy was like in Halifax and what you experienced, and then moreover, the entire experience at the summit, because I wished that I could have attended, and I actually did end up running into people at Whitby who did attend, and they had more commentary on the feel of Halifax and their Blackness, but I'll get to that after, but I'll let you recount the event first.
Yeah, it's I mean, so this event was 3 days. It didn't actually take place during Emancipation Day, but it was leading up to it. So the last day was Emancipation Eve. And that was intentional. They announced that. But the weirdest thing was the moment I arrived, it definitely had a very international feel. There were people, all kinds of people from all kinds of places, except none of them were white. Well, one of them was white. I literally noticed the one white guy in the room. And it was surreal to see so many Black people in one room. And I think, honestly, we were just checking each other out for a while. You were saying that one of the events was organized very well. This one had some glitches, I will admit. We were all waiting in the beginning for 45 minutes or an hour in line for a name tag. It turned out we did not need. But it also was a perfect opportunity for us to all like awkwardly stand around and check each other out and be like, oh my God, you're here. And people were talking everywhere. I made a really good friend in that line. And I think overall the 3 days was it's like kind of cliche to say that it's transformative, but my life is different because I went. So yeah, I found it very deeply impactful, and it was weird to come out of it as well, right? Like it was, I think it was Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and Sunday opened with a church service, which I haven't been to, wow, I don't know, since I was a child. And this one was really, really special. Everyone cried. Everyone sang and cried and clapped. And then it was just over. And I was on the waterfront listening to a trombone singing like a cover from the Titanic. And it was just like, it was just all mismatched, right? It was like, I was just like watching an African interpretive dance and listening to gospel. And then the next second I'm listening to on the harbor front. And it was kind of, yeah, it was bittersweet because as much as we were celebrating all being together, you know, there was always that reminder that we're still in a white world, we're still in a white space. All of the rooms are -3 degrees Celsius, literally. You know, it's in a convention center where they have really strict rules about the food, so there was no African food. Even the summit format itself is where there's so many workshops going on at the same time, you can't possibly go to all of them. That's the classic format of a summit. But I think in this case where we were talking about housing and homelessness. We were talking about racial trauma. We were talking about police violence, mental health, anti-racism toolkits. It's like I don't feel like we should have had to choose, but what a wonderful start, because it was absolutely worth going. And I think everyone who did go was extremely lucky to be there.
While Sandra's been speaking, I've been sharing just some photos of like from the events and from people who were speaking that are actually in articles that were shared by Sandra in the Twice as Good newsletter. So if you go to xg.ca, you can sign up for Sandra's newsletter, and you could be you could have looked at this stuff a couple days ago when I got it in my inbox, because I have already looked at these articles because of Sandra. I am curious, just as a follow-up, did you end up also doing something for Emancipation Day as well, or was this like, I've prayed, I've cried, I've seen a trombone, I am plumb tuckered out, and I'm gonna like get my reparations and rest on the first? Or did you continue to find something else to participate in?
I was looking for another thing to participate in, but I think that was I had kind of missed. So one of the first things that you could do as part of the summit was hop on a bus or take yourself to Africville. And they did a tour, and they had the church museum open and everything. And at Africville, there was all of these tents set up, because they get this special permission, I guess, for people to set up tents, and they set up tents where their families used to live. So we get there, and there's all these tents and RVs, and they get their own water, and they have a huge communal tent for dancing and barbecue and stuff. And I missed the actual like party barbecue night, which I thought would be on Emancipation Day, but it was like the Saturday. So for my Emancipation Day, I rested, which I also learned is a form of resistance.
It absolutely is.
I've heard that too. Yeah.
That's
wow.
amazing.
I think I'm certainly having some regrets about not being there. I don't know
Big
if anyone
FOMO.
else has that feeling.
Yeah.
Not FOMO. I think I did miss out, and I think transformative sounds very accurate. It's being held somewhere else in Canada next year? Are you aware of that? Did they announce that at the end of the summit?
Oh, I don't know where it is next year, but I think they did it in maybe Vancouver and Toronto. Hopefully it's in Montreal next year. I think that would make sense, but I don't know for sure.
Okay.
But one huge thing that I did not mention is that at the very end, they made this huge declaration. And one of the reasons why that declaration is important, I think, is because it sets a precedent that like bona fide organizations have gathered enough support, not just with like across the country, but internationally, to make this happen, to demand it of the legislature, basically. And the demands, you can read about it at CBC or at my newsletter. And
2xg.ca.
And I'll also be writing about that as well, because let me bring it back, Sandra. Okay. It's a lot to try and cover. It's 3 days, and it's so hard to even describe where it comes from, or like to encapsulate it all. So you had earlier asked a question about how to keep it going. And I think one of the things that we can do to keep it going is to just keep talking about it, obviously. Like once it's not relevant in the news anymore, that doesn't mean we can't talk about it. So I'm going to spend the next few weeks just talking about that one thing.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, I think were you going to say something, Hillary?
I was just going to say that it was what struck me the most in your newsletter this week, as opposed to it just being like like collating articles, was you straight up saying like, I am going to do sort of the opposite of standard journalism and report on one thing and move past it, and actually spend a lot of time working on discussing this. And that I don't know what it was about the brain, if for me, that I was like, oh, going against the norm, much more invested now. So at least like if people do want to learn more about the other days, like you can visit the website to see the other issues, and then there is more coming out on all 3 of the days together. Because I was looking forward to hearing the rest of your thoughts. Go ahead, Clinton.
No, that's okay. I was just gonna so would you say the reason that events like this need to continue to take place is to kind of show the power and the influence that is growing, and also so that we can continue to talk about things like this. Was there anything else you would, that's what I got from what you were saying. Is there anything else you'd add to why events like this need to take place?
Yes, one more thing I would, thank you for asking. One more thing I would like to add to that is, well, I guess two things. One is, I am trying to think of a time, and I consider myself a history buff as well. But I can't think of a time when so many Black Canadians from across the country gathered in Nova Scotia. And the last like big, important, notable gathering I can think of that brought disparate groups of Black people together would be back in the days of the Black United Front and the Black Panthers. And at that time, it was under the threat of police violence and harassment, Joan and Rocky Jones having their phones bugged, being followed by police everywhere, being put on the CSIS watch list, like Canadian CIA, they're put on the watch list as terrorists. And here we are, we're just gathering a bunch of basically professional people who are lucky enough to have the money to pay for the ticket, or who have employers who would pay for the ticket, or who've done something notable enough that they got a free ticket. And this kind of led to my second point, which is on the last day, there's this amazing sermon from Reverend Leonard Anderson. I think he was from the Hammonds Plains Church. And he told this story of Mephibosheth. This is from the Bible. I'm not a Bible buff, but this story of Mephibosheth, it's the story of David. So David fought the Goliath, he survived the lion's den, and then he becomes king. And I'm not going to tell this story as beautifully as it was told to me, but once he becomes a king, he asks, who else can I show kindness to in this town? And his servants say, well, there's this guy, Mephibosheth, who lives in Lolabar, who is lame in his feet. And I think he was related to someone that he knew who had passed. And he said, well, take me to him. And, you know, he's a king. And they're like, don't go there. That's Lolabar. That's like the ghetto. Kings don't go there. And he goes, and Mephibosheth basically crawls out of his house and bows down. He's like, oh my God, I can't believe, what are you doing here? You know, I'm nothing. I am a dead dog. And the Reverend says, now dogs back then didn't have rights like they do now. They didn't have their own little houses and their own clothes and stuff. He said a dog was a dog back then. And he said he was a dead dog. So just that's how low he thought of himself. But David looks at him and says, you and all your family will eat forever, and I'm giving you everything you need, and you'll always eat at my table forever. The moral of the story is, once we're here at the table, it's our duty to look around and say who is missing from this table and bring them here. So that's another reason why we have to continue this, because this, there's so many more people at the table, and people who deserve a place at the table. And of the 1,000, I think it was like 1,200 people who were at that summit, we were all basically the luckiest ones. So it's time to bring more people to the table.
I'm very glad you added that last part. That was great. And you know, Black culture, I mean, we have to have a little Bible story in here somewhere.
Yeah.
Granted, I tried to Google Thimisha, and then
I did too. I couldn't find it.
I know, I said I
It's
found like
yeah.
a medication for thyroidism, and I was like, it doesn't sound like it.
You can find it if you actually type in like dead dog Bible. That seems to be the part that sticks out a lot in that story.
Okay.
No, but yeah, we need to keep having events like this, because we need to see who's not at the table and bring more and more people to the table.
Oh, what?
It's okay. If you want a dead dog Bible, anyone?
Mephibosheth.
Okay, we're moving on.
Well, actually, before we move on, I just heard from Mamadou, who will be able to join us shortly / briefly.
Sounds good.
Just a forewarning heads up.
Thank you. In the
You're welcome.
meantime, okay, Hillary,
Oh yeah, I
on
went
to
to,
you.
I did something
So
too.
Hillary, yeah, you went to an event in Whitby, and if
I
I'm not
did.
mistaken, you emceed it. Is that correct?
I did.
All right, so we're still East Coast Ontario and Whitby,
Yeah.
east of Toronto. If I okay,
Yeah,
you tell
past
us about the
Scarborough.
event. Yeah, yeah.
Past Scarborough. So Greg Frankson, the first guest that we ever had on, editor and poet in the African Anthology, did a guest speaking engagement with the Whitby Public Library, along with Dwayne Morgan and Asante Houghton, also two public speakers. Dwayne Morgan having a star on the Scarborough Walk of Fame, public speaker and spoken word poet for 29 years. Asante Houghton, actually more in the mental health realm of public speaking and guest speaking, but has slowly been starting to do poetry and spoken word art, if you will. And so was very funny when he like went to perform, because he was very much like, I don't typically do this out in public. I just like make a rap in a notes app and I hope it sounds good and I send it and apparently it sounds good. So it was very like humble and kind. Crowd was mixed. So this happened on the 4th, so after, but it was their main, I believe, Emancipation Day event. And yeah, the crowd was definitely mixed. There were some Black people, white people, some kids, and we were asked what the content would really be like of the poems. I, as you mentioned, emceed. I wore some of my Senegalese clothes because they never make it out of my like Tupperware bin where they hide, just because I never tend to wear them. And it was my first time emceeing, which everyone was very surprised just because of my personality. But it went very well and I had a really great time. It was really nice seeing how people reacted to the spoken word poetry. I would say that the themes consisted somewhat of slavery and freedom, only in the sense that a lot of referencing to how we still are enslaved by a white supremacist culture now, politics, a lot of references to the murder of George Floyd, and sort of how African Anthology even came to be relevant and published in the last like couple of years since his murder. And so there was a lot of discussion around that. All three of the men are also parents. So a lot of the discourse after and conversation ended up being more so around like, how do we raise our men to be better to Black women, but then also how do we protect Black women, and how do we like, it was really like enthralling conversation. There was this one woman who she had wanted to bring her like younger sons, who I guess she's overhearing the way that they talk about women during video games and is like having some concerns and doesn't know how to broach the subject. And so it was really interesting to have like older themes coming into like modern themes, and sort of this big mix. And like the overarching theme was very much knowledge is education, is power, and to remain curious with your kids, encouraging your kids to be curious about their Blackness, about their identity, about everything, and just to be non-judgmental all of the time. And that included being non-judgmental to the white allies in the room who were participating and trying to listen and feel the weight of the conversation while looking like they were uncomfortable, but not trying to exude any of that discomfort. I kept making eyes with this older white woman, and I was like, girl, it's okay. It's okay. You can hear us say the N-word and talk about slavery, and you don't have to feel bad. It's fine. But all like some people cried at different parts. One of my favorite like spoken word poems that was done, Asante does one called Safe and Unsafe, and it's about growing up like with some slight Jamaican descent, but not feeling Jamaican enough once going to school in Scarborough, and then sort of feeling like he never really fit in at all in school, and then whitewashing himself to be like the token Black kid that's perfect in school. And like the white people were crying. I was crying. I was like, I never fit in either, you understand? And everyone like very much felt that. So it was wonderful. I would say it was super worth having. I was very surprised. Again, as I think we both know since doing this podcast, my experience in mainly Black spaces has been limited, and with COVID even more so. And so it's nice to be in these spaces and see these talks happen. And so I thought it was great. I really appreciated all of the allyship. They sold like 20 books and all of their merch. People were moved, bought, everything flew off the shelf. 10 out of 10. Will do again. That's it. That was Whitby.
Amazing. And we've heard a lot of insights tonight about, why do we need events like this to take place? Do you have anything you want to add to that part of the conversation? I'm trying to write down some of the key
I mean,
reasons there.
I think that like the main reason is sort of what I said, that how I felt that event was encapsulated is just that like this education of and knowledge is more power. It's more power for Black people. But like what I think I by and large always wish is that I wish white people would also understand that it's more power to them, because the systems in place right now are serving nobody. Like they are mainly not serving Black people, but like one of my favorite lines in Run the Jewels song right now is basically like the cage fits anybody. Like once we're all in the cage, who's next going in it? It's like we're all going to end up suffering together if we don't try to work to better the world as a whole. I'm a socialist. I believe in community. And so I think these things need to go on so that we're all educated about what everyone has experienced and we can all play from the same foundation moving forward. And I think it was riveting to hear these stories, and like people were breaking into song. It's just very cool to see how culture also evokes emotion and how it moves people. As a creative person, I found that to be touching on top of the importance of the topics. So they just need to keep happening. That's how I feel. It's just
No,
important.
that's amazing. I'm actually really happy that I got different insights from everyone so far as to why these events need to take place. There are reasons that I haven't even thought of. I had a little bit of a fear that there would be overlapping things, but everyone brought some really unique things to the table. I like what you said, Hillary, because, Black people have been responsible for many civil rights issues in the past that did end up trickling down to benefit people of all cultures. I've also heard complaints during the past 2 years that, the focus has only been on Black people, and what about other cultures facing oppression and racism? And I'd like to think that hopefully by Black people coming together to work on anti-racism, we're helping to create a better future for all cultures as well. Any other immigrants that come here, newcomers, refugees, the works. So thank you for that.
Of course.
And hello, with perfect timing.
Hi, Mamadou. How are you?
Fashionably late. Welcome,
Hi,
Mamadou.
I'm doing good. Hi, everyone.
I'll blame me. I should have emailed because he provided an email, and because we were speaking on Facebook all day, I ran with that. So we can blame the communications major for not communicating effectively.
No
she
problem.
does that a lot. But I'm so glad you were able to come. Matthew spoke about the event and how much he enjoyed it. And I did read some of the CPPAANB's thank you list to all, like, you had just a laundry list of amazing people participate at the event. Kudos. I think that's absolutely wonderful. I would love it if you could tell, first of all of our listeners, like some of your bio, what you do for the CPPAANB and who you are. And then just like your thoughts and feelings on the event that you got to hold, what was important from it, and some major takeaways.
Yeah, great. Thank you for that, and thanks for the opportunities. And I do apologize for the late joining as well. My name is Mamadou Diallo. I'm the actual president of People of African Descent of New Brunswick. So it has been a great activities on 1st August that we organized here. We were with my brother and Matthew. So basically, we organized a conference, like a day of reflection on the decade of people of African descent that has been declared by the United States on the objective of recognition, justice, and development. So that was the best moment for us to make a reflection on that decade. And we received here a UN rapporteur on minority issues who talked about the decade, and we had also a lot of invite, like people coming from government, federal government, provincial government, and municipal, and many organizations were with us to celebrate that date. So basically, it was a great day. And I don't know if you have a specific question, and sorry for my English, but it's not a perfect English.
No, it's perfectly fine.
I can understand you just fine. Yeah.
Yeah.
Great.
I'll ask this is specifically the question we've sort of been asking everybody is, for you, what did you feel that the atmosphere was in the room of the event? I know like Matthew described it as like, and we could see it in the pictures, which we did share as well. Like it seemed like so joyous and everybody really seemed to be having a good time. And again, there were so many like very important, prolific people, and everyone was dressed up, and the awards, it looked like a lot of fun. If you wanted to share how you felt the atmosphere at the event was.
I think it was a great moment, like an indescriptible moment, because it wasn't not only a reflection day, but it was a celebration day as well. Because we had an artist coming from Toronto, Abel Maxwell, who helped us who sing very well as well. And it was a great moment. I felt very good. We remember how people of African descent, how Black people in New Brunswick was so important, and how they are contributing to development of our province and in Canada as well. So that was a great moment for us to celebrate the Emancipation Day.
Amazing. I wish I could have been there. I also just want to say very briefly that I think it's Monique Leblanc. She taught me science at University of Moncton. And every time I see her at these events, I'm like, girl, you failed me in chemistry. And I always laugh because I'm so happy for her and her political success. But I also just harbor a little bit of anger about not knowing like NaCl back in my university days. I will ask you as well, what we've been asking everybody else too, is just like, especially I find it interesting, the pairing it with the reflection on New Brunswick because of the first also being New Brunswick Day. Why do you think it's so important for these events to continue? And I would also highlight, if you could, not only the importance as like a Black historical event, but a New Brunswick Black historical event for the province as well.
I think it's gonna be very important to continue celebrating that day, because the Black community are contributing hugely in the development in our society. So we have to celebrate them every time. We have many people that are facing racism and discriminations, but above all those things, they are continuing to struggle and to work hard to make this community better. So I think celebrating Emancipation Day is not only recognition of the abolition of slavery, but it's the time to celebrate also the contribution and the huge contribution of Black people here in our province. So I think we have to celebrate them every day, but especially Emancipation Day, the first of that.
I'm very, very like thrilled at how all of these events have sounded. And I think like my main place of like FOMO or jealousy, well, I'm very jealous about what Sandra described at the National Black Summit and how much I really wanted to go. I always just get so much like so frustrated but proud at how New Brunswick has developed, but since I've left. It's like everyone decided to be Black once I moved to Ontario, and I'm like, guys, I want to be there. Like all of the events looked absolutely wonderful, and I'm so like very proud of especially New Brunswick and the like genuine leaps and bounds since I have moved to get all of those people in a room, because I can't imagine like 5 years ago having all of those politicians in a room celebrating me and my people and something that matters to me in that way. I think I always felt very ostracized and alone from the government, and like you're your own person and do your own thing, and we're a group of people and we make the rules and you have to abide by them, but we don't want to connect with you. And I find ever since like the murder of George Floyd, organizations like the CPPAANB, BLM, all of these different things that everyone's doing, Reach, like all the New Brunswick Artists Alliance, like all of them, it seems like there's no way for the government to not actively participate in the amazing things that all four of you are doing. And that makes me very, very proud to like have you all on, to be a part of, and also to be able to be like, that's my community, those are my people.
Absolutely. I mean, I can say myself, well, I've been living in New Brunswick for 13 years. I've had about 23 years of exposure to New Brunswick. And, in a lot of ways, it feels like there's been a lot of racism and prejudice and restrictions. I know it wasn't even probably 10, 15 years where there were still certain areas in New Brunswick where it was in legislature that Black people were not allowed to buy homes in certain communities and neighborhoods. The Moncton, I think, slogan is like, our tides are changing. I don't know how true that is for Moncton itself, itself, but I really feel like that's true for Black people and Black communities. And it's really uplifting and encouraging to see that in a lot of ways, Black people are leading that change. And hopefully, like I'm repeating myself here, but making a better East Coast for the future of Black people and all people of color as well. So what we've tried to do here today is sort of create a smorgasbord of different events that took place around the East Coast and let people see that a number of East Coast events did take place. They were powerful. They had big turnouts. Traditionally, it seemed that Black people didn't interact with the towns or cities they lived in, and that's changing a lot more now. There's a lot more boldness in coming out. Unfortunately, we tried to get Tamara Steele, who is the president of the Black Cultural Society of PEI, just to get that full circle experience. She wasn't available, but
she's on vacation, but I feel like we would
Right.
be able to circle back because she did say that their event was amazing. And can I interrupt and say briefly that I forgot what I actually did on Emancipation Day and why I took a nap? It was Caravana. It was Caravana.
Fair,
I was twerking
fair.
on a road. Sorry.
That's basically Emancipation Day before there was Emancipation
Yeah,
Day.
yeah, that's North America's
Absolutely.
Emancipation Day.
I will say
Wish I
very
was there too. Yeah.
I will say very briefly that what like the last hour I caught of it was absolutely just crazy bananas and so much fun and so many people dancing and wiling out, but like having a good time, and it really felt like if there was ever an event to pretend that COVID is over, even though it very much is not, that was the one. That was the one where it felt like everybody was liberated and free. And it wasn't, no offense to any of these people listening, but like the prissy white fashion parties that I go to, where everyone's like, now that COVID is over, I'm so happy that you could all be here and share in this fashion film. This one was like, there ain't never been COVID. Like it was very intense and so much fun. And it was my first Caravana.
Yeah.
So that was my real Emancipation Day. It was so
To
good.
anyone listening who doesn't know what Caravana is, it's North America's biggest sort of Black Caribbean cultural festival. People from all over America and all over Canada come to Toronto, my hometown. And like it's one big weekend of like Black people from every city at the same club. Like, and it's all weekend, it's outdoors, it takes place in different places. There's Caravana, there's Yonge Street on Fridays. What are you doing?
There's also, this year was the Global Black Pride was also hosted in conjunction with Caravana. So
Cool.
the annual coming together of Black queers was done in conjunction with Caravana. So you got to be Black wild and then you get to be Black gay wild on Sunday. And it was fantastic. That's all.
Cool. Cool. Well, and the reason I was explaining what Caravana is because finally this September, over the weekend of September 2nd to the 4th, I believe it's going to be Atlantic Canada's first ever sort of cultural festival celebration called Summer Salsa, taking place in Fredericton, New Brunswick. And that's why we see Jennifer dancing on the screen there, getting ready for it. And yeah, so I hope this goes really well. They were supposed to do it in 2020, 2021, they had a virtual one, and now it's going to be the jump off. I hope there are people that come from all over Atlantic Canada to express, you know, Caribbean culture, as well as, of course, African culture and the heritage and rich culture of Black people here in Atlantic Canada as well. So I don't know if we have too much time to get into too much more discussion. Matt, I think there was something you wanted to elaborate on as well. And after that, if there's just any closing thoughts about Emancipation Day, the experience, the feelings of community that anyone wants to chime in, just jump in. And then we'll go over everyone's name once again for the audio listeners, and we'll end off.
Yeah, so I think I was, we've been having such great discussions that I kind of lost my train of thought on it.
Okay.
But I believe I had mentioned, you know, discussing kind of the policies and procedures and kind of the injustices that still happen here in New Brunswick. And that it's important that, and I think Emancipation Day really showed it with the unity of the Black communities coming together, all the Black organizations who were partnering together on all the different events. You know, again, kind of taking to what Sandra said, to say, you know, some of these folks are at the table. Now we need to start bringing others, because there are so many injustices and procedures and policies that exist here in New Brunswick that are just so systemically racist, that it's mind-boggling that they still exist. I think a perfect example is when we look at the recent announcement with the government announcing that the simplified process for Ukrainian refugees. I want to say that yes, that is it's wonderful that this policy has been simplified, but with the province that's continued to say, you know, we're being equitable and inclusive, and then to come out to say this, to have the simplified process and not include all refugees is just an example of some of these systemic barriers that are in place. And it builds so much aggression now towards refugees who are coming from other parts of the world against Ukrainians. Why is there something it's so simple for Ukrainians, but if you were coming from any other country, you got to start the whole process over. So that's just an example of, you know, these policies and procedures that just are not equitable. They're not inclusive. Again, most folks coming from Ukraine are white and European. So again, it's putting racialized community groups at a disadvantage. The policy is not really changing for white people. It's still the same. They just happen to be coming from somewhere else. And again, I want to say it is absolutely wonderful that this process is available for Ukrainian refugees, but we need to make that available for all refugees coming to New Brunswick. Again, if we're gonna, you know, talk the talk, then let's fully walk the walk, not just for some folks. So going back, I think when we have these Emancipation Day events, it's an opportunity where all these Black leaders who are working on so many different things, whether it's, you know, an Afro-Canadian center, or programs for seniors, or organizations that help curate and embrace Black arts and cultures, or bring forward our history. It's important that as much as we do, there are still these procedures and policies that we need to break down for our work to really flourish, and to really take root in society. So that's
Yeah.
kind of, I could keep going, but I feel like I need my own TED talk at that point.
You are going to be on our show very soon. I promise you that. And I'm really happy that you brought that up, because you're right. I think just last week or something, we talked about how in Nigeria, even though that is basically a completely English country, in order for Nigerian students to come to Canada, they have to take an English proficiency test, which is not required in many other English-speaking countries around the world.
To go to a lot of the universities, one of them being UPEI. So if you're an international student to come and study, you have to prove that you can speak English when the
education system in Nigeria from K to 12 and university and college is all in English anyways. Another thing is I work in the beauty industry, and hair salons, the Cosmetology Association of New Brunswick, you know, they've never taught a day of textured hair, wavy, curly, ethnic hair. There's been many petitions for that to change. It's never happened. And in fact, they are now trying to regulate services like dreading and braiding, box braids, and certain services that have traditionally been more ethnic and African based. However, they're trying to regulate them, but refuse to teach them in the schools. And not only that, they just recently passed a declaration that refugees arriving from Ukraine who had hair license equivalents can challenge the exam and instantly become hairstylists here in New Brunswick, when that has never been an option for anyone coming from any other country, even from other provinces in Ontario. It's never been an option. Now, like you were saying, Matt, that's great, but why did it take this? How come Syrian, you know, barbers and hairstylists coming from Syria did not have that same opportunity? How come people from other countries don't have this opportunity? And again, it's great. The change is taking place. This needs to trickle down into other areas as well.
And I don't think that's going to be the end of it. I don't think it's going to stop there. I think we're going to continue to see more announcements that are similar to these, where these privileges, and I'm only calling them privileges because they're not given out to other refugees at this point. That these simplified privileges, there's definitely going to be more that come through, and I think the more we look at it, we need to look at it more critically, because, you know, as they start to come to light, these are going to be things that they're not offering other people. So it's so frustrating. And Mamadou, with CPPAANB, the Nigerian Canadian Association, New Brunswick African Association, had all put a statement out, and we started some primary conversations with the provincial government to look at these things. But again, it's now being reactive to a situation rather than saying, hey, before we announce it, let's look at it for everybody. And again, We can't let perfection stop progress. But if we're going to continue as a province to preach that we're diverse and equitable, inclusive, we really, really need to start walking the walk with it, not just doing things here and doing things here, because it really just now pits Ukrainian refugees against other refugees, and they're looking at them and they're not seeing them as another refugee, but they're looking at them as now someone who gets privileges that they don't because they're from Ukraine.
Yeah. It reminds me a little bit of some of what, like, not necessarily refugee related, but I would say maybe government laziness related, of it took COVID to start considering nurses and doctors from other countries that they could challenge some of the testing here, or become like, it took infrastructure failure because of a global pandemic to finally be like, oh, maybe this person who was a nurse in another country could also be a nurse. You're like,
Didn't
maybe they
have
really
to drive a taxi for 10
maybe,
years and go back to medical school and go in debt $100,000.
exactly.
Sorry.
And
Yeah, that's what you're saying.
no,
Yeah.
these are the same similarities and like privileges, as you said, that like we're finally giving this out because, in my opinion, white people are getting sick with COVID, and this time we're giving it out because they are white refugees. And I think there's a relatability in what they see in them, and that's totally fine, but you have to give it to everybody. Everybody gets a cookie. We don't only give the Ukrainians the cookies.
It's very hard to say that there is not a line and a connection to be made there.
Mhm.
So, I mean, until they start doing this for everyone, it's hard to not come to those conclusions. Thank you for bringing that up, Matt. Jennifer, Mamadou, Sandra, any final thoughts for yourselves? Like,
I just want to mention, because I have to history info dump. I can't help it. One of the things I didn't mention, and that makes the day so important, is that historically Canadians, Black Canadians, have been celebrating Emancipation Day since August 1st, 1834. So I have newspaper records in St. John in 1858. They were holding their third annual dinner with, in attendance were 3 Black entrepreneurs, business owners in St. John. And like it's a historic thing throughout Canada that we've been doing this. So like I meet a lot of people that they're like, oh, this is a new thing. And I'm like, no, no, no. The Black community has been celebrating since the abolition of slavery. And fun fact, a month after the 1858 celebration, they held a fundraising soiree in St. John, these same 3 Black businessmen, because they were raising money to buy the son of a St. John couple that was still enslaved in Virginia.
Wow.
So,
wow.
yeah, and these 3 businessmen were all previously enslaved in Virginia, had made their way to St. John in the 1850s, opened businesses, and were leaders in the community. Sorry, have to info dump.
No, thank
Are you
you.
kidding?
No, I
Thank you.
love
It's
that.
so interesting to hear that. It's wild. It's nice to hear, like, yeah, like there's not this straight timeline of equality. You know, there were business people in the 1800s, and we don't know the specific challenges they faced, but it's really uplifting to know that there were Black businessmen in St. John, New Brunswick, that had even the potential to buy and free and emancipate a slave from the States who shouldn't have been enslaved. Yeah, stories like that are great. Like racism tends to, I think it rises and lowers over the years, and it's hard to have a perfect track record of history. But go ahead, Sandra.
I feel like that
sorry,
goes
Jennifer.
back to the whole bring us all to the table kind of thing, right?
Yes.
And also the fact that these things don't happen unless we make them happen, and we continue to do it, because people who were enslaved have legally even fought for their freedom here in Atlantic Canada, right? There are records of people who were enslaved in the States suing for their ownership, like to own themselves. So like we're literally freeing ourselves.
Any final thoughts from yourself other than that, Sandra?
Maybe I just wanted to say
Nice.
and how it's gonna be important for everyone to work together. Each on our side are doing a great job. So, but if you're working for Black people, for African people, it's important to work together so that if Black Lives Matter work only on his side, he can go fastly, but he won't go far than when we all work together. So it's very important to support each other on every initiative and be able to work together, because it's that way we're gonna be powerful, and it's that way we're gonna be stronger, and it's that way we're gonna be able to achieve our objective all together for the benefit of African and Black people. So here in CPPAANB, we're working to achieve the objective of the decade, on the objective of recognition, justice, and development. In recognition, that include Emancipation Day, that include celebrating the contribution of Black people everywhere in the world. So doing that is not Emancipation Day or celebrating Black people or doing Black History Month. It's only a part of what as Black people we have faced up. So it's very important, like to know that we have, and if we want to go so far, we have to work together.
Yeah, was it if you want to go fast,
Absolutely.
go alone. If you want to go far, go together, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. I also wanted to say briefly, the story that Jennifer said just reminded me, and I feel silly saying this, but in the narrative of Canada is a place of sanctuary at the end of the Underground Railroad, I don't know how many people were critically thinking about the people that got left behind. And in saying that, I was like, oh my God, of course, that there would be people who came here who would have left people behind that they then want to like buy and save. And I don't know why my young brain had never thought of that conceptually, but that blew me away. And that does go back to the go far and take everybody with you little mantra.
They make mention in the newspaper article, one of the gentlemen that actually spoke in 1858 at this celebration said that his mind was still with those in Virginia, which is where he was from, because, you know, slavery was abolished here. It wasn't in the US. So
That's the area where my family's from. That's so weird hearing that.
there were many here from that area that ended up in St. John.
100%. That's insane. Sandra, I'll give you one last time because I wanted to know if you had any other final thoughts before we wrap up this very wonderful conversation. Our first roundtable. We're going to be definitely doing more.
Very inspired.
Yeah, I'm very happy. But yeah, Sandra, did you have anything else you wanted to say? I didn't want to skip over you.
I feel like we're already on it, but this whole topic just brings me back to, it's so important to think about your ancestors. And if you've ever struggled loving yourself or feeling happy for yourself, think about your ancestors. Think about how happy they would be to see our faces lined up on this machine talking to each other. Even just if you just laid around all day and played video games and stuffed your face with food, that's so amazing. So just appreciate that. And if you stand, what's that saying? If you stand tall, it's because you stand on the shoulders of those who came before you. So let's stand tall.
I'm gonna start crying.
Thank you.
No, thank you. Yeah, everyone snaps for Sandra. Yeah. Thank you. So actually, Sandra, while we're speaking to you, if you wanted to take a second to plug 2XG, your social media, anybody, and then I will go around and we'll give everybody their moment to shout out their organizations, and we will bid everybody a bonne nuit.
Okay. So the number 2XG.ca, that's where you can go. 2 times good, twice as good. 2xg.ca. You can go there and sign up for the newsletter. Or find some narratives that you'll be able to read and listen to about the 3-day summit leading up to Emancipation Day. And I now have an Instagram with 0 posts. So if you would like to be my first Instagram follower, I'm at Twice as Good Media, at Twice as Good Media, just spelled out, no caps or whatever, spaces, underscores.
I'm running to be first right now. Not even from the BlackLantic account, just me personally. I'm number 2. Nice.
Hey.
Matthew, would you like to shout out Black Lives Matter, where people can find you as well?
Yeah, so you can find us online at blmnb.org, on Facebook at Black Lives Matter New Brunswick, and on Instagram at BLM New Brunswick. And you can check out like all the programs that we offer currently on our website to get enrolled. You can also just keep an eye on our Facebook. We have some really exciting programs that we're just getting ready to make available to the public and bring out. So you can be the first to see those when we announce them on our Facebook. And we have a lot of exciting projects coming up over the next couple of months.
That's so super exciting. Jennifer, we will have you next. If you wanted to shout out those organizations that you so lovingly work with, and how people can find out more about you and all your history, genealogy knowledge.
So yeah, number 1, Reach in New Brunswick. We have a Facebook page, so you can find us on Facebook. Working on our website. We're still a new organization, but we can be, reached through Facebook or info@reachnb.com. Also shout out to New Brunswick Black Artists Alliance, who also has a Facebook page where you can follow along what they're doing and all the new amazing things that they're up to, and the New Brunswick African Association.
Awesome. Thank you. And Mamadou, if you would like to shout out the CPPAANB, which I always say with like that much energy.
How long it is.
It's like I could like want to snap to it. It has a very good rhythm, which of course it's a Black organization. It's got rhythm. If you want to shout out where people can find that and any more information about you as well.
Yeah, sure. They can find us on our website on www.cppaanb.ca and on Facebook as well in French, Conseil des personnes d'ascendance africaine du Nouveau-Brunswick. And they can also find us on LinkedIn by the same name, with the same name, Conseil des personnes d'ascendance africaine du Nouveau-Brunswick. And if anyone want to find me personally, I have my own page, Facebook as well, Mamadou Diallo. So thank you very much for the great opportunity, Larry.
No, thank you for coming on. I'm so glad that you were able to join, even though it was at the last minute. And both you and Matthew, we will have to have you back on so that we can spend more time talking to the two of you as well. Clinton.
All right, everyone, let's pose for the screenshot before we wrap up here.
Oh, I was taking pictures the whole time.
Okay.
I can still take one.
2, 3.
Thank you.
All right.
Did you like my pose?
It's very good.
Well, thank you so much once again. Like one of Hillary and I's favorite parts about doing this, I think, is the feeling that we get when we learn and experience and share with other people. We found this to be very insightful.
Mm-hmm.
I will speak for Hillary in this case. And thank you so much for being on the show. To anyone listening, BlackLantic, bad shout outs and love to you all. And we will see you next week.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.